And we are live. Welcome everybody to another Harry Potter TCG live stream. This is the first live stream I'm doing on the actual classic format of the game. I've been streaming Harry Potter TCG Revival and also Harry Potter TCG Classic-ish, which is basically the house format that I played at home for a long time. First of all, for those who don't know, the classic format for Harry Potter TCG is something that the Harry Potter TCG Revival group came up with when they started making new sets to have a format for the players who just enjoy the game as it was. So basically, the classic format is simply the 5 original sets with no ban list, no changes, all the original rules, just like it was. So basically, the original game, no new expansions at all. And as I said, I played at home for a very long time with house rules. There was a changed version of the unique rule that made it so I have had a different experience playing at home, and haven't really experienced the classic format until recently, when I started talking to Frank, who is the guest of today, who will jump on a bit later. We will discuss and we will play a match of Classic. So I played for a long time at home, and came up with a bunch of different decks. And a very interesting thing is that one of the decks that I found, or archetypes that I found in my testing at home, and ended up banning. We made a ban list at home because we didn't think it was fun and too powerful. Is also one of the main, or probably the main deck in Classic, the main archetype, and that archetype is based around this card down here called Caught by Snape. So I wanted for this stream to be basically an overview of my impressions of what the classic format is, what it revolves around, the current metagame. Big caveats are that there's not a huge player base of people who play classic super seriously. Frank is one of them who really wants to get to the bottom of what is the truth of the format, what are the best decks, how does the meta actually work, what are the best things to play. So I feel like there's probably a lot left to explore, because with more players, there's more exploration. It's hard for a couple of people to fully explore a meta. Still, one thing is clear, and that is that this Caught by Snape deck is really good. So what I found interesting when I first started interacting with the Harry Potter community is that, which was recently when I started this channel, before I'd read a few articles or whatever, and I didn't find any resource on decks abusing Caught by Snape in the same way that I had been doing at home. But it turns out that in 2019, Frank and his brother had made a Caught by Snape deck that they brought to Gen Con and did really well with. I think they won the tournament. He can correct me when he gets here. This is the deck, original version of the deck. I'm sure it has gone through many iterations since then. That's posted on a website that was created by basically some friends of his. They post decks there sometimes, called the Dark Mark, which is this website I have up right now. And basically, I think that the classic metagame revolves around the Caught by Snape deck because it is so powerful. So stuff that I talked about on the channel before is the power of these 3 characters: Ron Weasley, Ginny Weasley, and Seamus Finnigan. You have Ron to make your character cards cheaper to play. You have Ginny Weasley to give you a lot of draw based on the amount of characters you have in play. and you have shamans to give you more actions. Now, there are a lot more powerful characters that you can play, which is why Run is so good. But this is a core engine that essentially gives you both a lot of cards to choose from, to choose to make it so you have many options on what you can play on your turn with Ginny. Just more cards means more options. And Seamus being able to get you an extra action by getting rid of 2 cards once per turn means you have more actions as well. More actions, more cards means you're probably doing really well. So this on its own is a really powerful thing. And then on top of that, you can play Caught by Snape, which without going into much detail can basically lock your opponent out of playing cards. It makes your opponent only able to play lesson cards, and the only way to solve it, besides using an effect to get rid of it, is to play 3 lesson cards, and then it's discarded, and the reward is basically meaningless in most cases. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if you could just solve it and then it's gone and you don't have to deal with it anymore. But the problem is it's easy to recycle this card, and the deck that Frank made does this in one way, and what I'm playing does this in a different way. So in Frank's deck, you play Hannah Abbott, which I also do in my deck, a character that lets you get cards back from your discard pile. You can, of course, also shuffle them back with healing from Snape or from Madam Pomfrey, which we have down here. Oh, by the way, you can find both his deck list and my deck list down in the description. So Hannah allows you to get Caught by Snape back. And then the deck also plays a spell, Magical Mess Remover, that can get rid of your characters. So after you've used your once per game effect of some characters, you can discard them, enabling you to play those characters again. And in this case, that would allow you to play Hannah again and get more Caught by Snapes back to keep the lock going. So in my version of this deck, I play End of Year Feast, which is a spell that simply lets me put 4 adventure cards from my discard pile into my hand, as well as playing Hannah. So I think because Magical Mess Remover only requires 1 power, Frank's way of doing this is a faster way to be able to recycle the Caught by Snape, whereas the End of Year Feast is a more resilient way. So if your opponent is good at getting rid of the Caught by Snapes somehow, or you have a need to replace them faster, which I might get to why that is the case. For example, or I can talk about it right now. If you are playing against a deck that plays Seamus Finnigan, which is way to try to counter these Caught by Snape decks. By playing Seamus Finnigan yourself as your starting character, that means they can't play Seamus Finnigan and won't have that 3rd action. And so they can play a lesson, and then they have to play 3 more to be able to 2 more to be able to get out of the lock. They can use Seamus, discard 2 cards, get the 3rd action, and then get out of the lock by putting Ewing in a lock instead by playing a card like Deboning or something to that effect. So against a deck like this, you might want to play a new Caught by Snape already after 1 lesson is played, and that is easier to do when you have a card like End of Year Feast. You can get a bunch of them back and play them again. So that is a little bit of a difference between the decks. Another difference is in his deck, the kill that the way that you finish your opponent off is that you make them draw cards with effects like Peeves and Calling Creevy, which we have down here, and then you use Grip Hook to make them discard their hand and draw as many cards as they discarded. So you're trying to use this combo to get them to run out of cards. I'm instead trying to just use creatures. So I used to have Mandrake, and actually I notice now that the card I'm trying out today is not up. It's called Marble Gargoyle. Let me see. So instead, just playing a creature, getting rid of all the threats on the board, putting a creature down. Your opponent can't play anything, or you make sure you keep the lock going, and then the creature hits them every turn until they die. I like it doing it this way because it means you just require fewer cards to set up the kills, so it's easier to focus the rest of your slots on actually just keeping the lock going. I recently switched to Marble Gargoyle because I think it's not that hard to set up a scenario when you have the lock going where your opponent doesn't have any creatures. So Marble Gargoyle does extra damage when they don't have creatures. If you get a lock going, you can, for example, use an effect like a Quirrell before you play your creatures to make sure your opponent doesn't have any creatures on the board. And then Marble Gargoyle is a really quick way to kill them. So those are some interesting differences. Now, because this deck is so strong, people try to counter it in different ways. So one of the ways is what I just mentioned, a deck that Frank came up with that uses Seamus. So you play one lesson, and then you're threatening to play 2 more and a card that gets you out of the lock in the same turn. And so you're creating a way for yourself to escape the lock. You're also denying them the third action. You can also play a deck that with Ginny to deny the Caught by Snape deck their draw. So the unique rule really does make a difference, which is also why this is kind of a new experience for me, because with my unique rule, both players could have Ginny in play, and that's way different. So the picking your starting character really matters. And there's 2 more interesting ideas. The first one is to play McGonagall, which I have somewhere. So you can play McGonagall to get rid of the adventure your opponent has played. And it's basically the same idea as the Seamus deck. So you get to 7 power, you get rid of their adventure, and then you play Deboning, and suddenly they are in lock instead of you, and then you finish them off somehow while they are locked by Deboning. So both with the Seamus deck and the McGonagall deck, one of the main ways to counter that for the CBS deck is to have Draco Malfoy. That means you'll be able to look at their hand and discard cards from it. So if they are just sitting for a long time, building pieces up, waiting for the right moment to break out, Draco Malfoy can try to pick apart the cards that they need to actually lock you when they break out. Or in the case of the Seamus deck, so against the McGonagall deck, you'd probably get rid of Deboning. Against the Seamus deck, you might just get rid of a lesson so that they're not, that they can't solve the Caught by Snape. So that is an interesting interaction there between those decks, and I think that's why there is game in those matchups. Otherwise, you would eventually always break out of the lock, I think. But with Draco Malfoy, you can't really guarantee that. So those are 2 ways to try to break out of the lock. The Seamus, of course the Ginny deck as well. I'm not sure quite how that is built, but I've seen a Seamus deck, the McGonagall deck. There's also an idea to play Crabbe and Goyle, because in Frank's version of the deck, you make the CBS deck makes their opponent draw a lot of cards. Crabbe and Goyle can just discard cards to deal damage to your opponent. So instead of having a bunch of cards in your hand, you make it harder for them to kill you with Grip Hook at the same time that you're dealing damage to them. And perhaps you'll kill them before they kill you this way. So that was an idea that people had, how to counter this deck. I don't think this works against a version of the deck that plays Marble Gargoyle. I think you'll just get the Marble Gargoyles on the board, and you'll deal damage to them faster than they can deal it to you. I could be proven wrong, but that is my theory. So those are a couple of things about the CBS deck and ways to counter them. I think that's basically what the format revolves around right now. If it were to be the case that we make a deck or we find or we find that one of these decks very consistently beats CBS decks, then the format might shift in its character, because at that point you may want to start playing decks that beat the deck that beat the CBS deck, instead of just making decks that beat the CBS deck, and then the meta could evolve from there. But right now it's more about beating the CBS decks, and that seems to still be sort of an ongoing struggle, and I'll be curious to hear Frank's latest thoughts on this matter. Another little note about my decks versus Frank's is there is, of course, a mirror matchup where the CBS deck plays another CBS deck, where the Filches matter, because Filch means you can't get locked as long as Filch is on the board. So the amount of Filches that you play matters in the mirror matchup, and I think I'm a little bit greedier there, playing 2 Filches while he's playing 4. Same can be said for McGonagall, who helps you get rid of 1 Caught by Snape. So she sort of helps you not be locked until they're able to get her off the board. And I'm only playing 2 in mine as well, while I think he's playing more. Now, Dobby's Disappearance can get rid of your opponent's characters. So both decks play this because it's an incredibly powerful card. One thing I'm doing in my deck as well is play Hover Charm, which is a worse version of Dobby's Disappearance, but having more copies of things that bounce your opponent's characters to their hand means it's easier for you to gain access to character slots that you lost. If your opponent plays a character that you want to play, you can Hover Charm that character away and play your own copy. So that's an interesting difference. But I think that's enough talking about the theory of the format from my perspective, and I would like to bring in Frank, if you are there, Frank.
Hello.
Thank
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
I really,
Oh, sorry.
I really appreciate you giving me a chance to speak here and talk to your audience and talk about the Harry Potter trading card game. I love it. I've spent a lot of time on it, and so again, thank you for giving me this time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm just happy you wanted to come on and take the time to chat about it, and because I know you've spent a lot of time in the format, and you're curious about the truth of the game or whatever, and that's exactly what we need for this kind of stream. So that's just very nice.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, like you said, I'm really excited about the depth of the Harry Potter trading card game. It's been out for over 20 years, and there's still so much depth. There has been so much depth throughout. I mean, the character deck that we're talking about, we just came up with that in 2019. This is almost 20 years after the game came out. Players weren't looking at some of these same cards as being the best cards just a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it's also a case of like maybe I don't know, but I feel like the community for the game, like people playing the game might have been like totally siloed off, like I wasn't interacting with people, and so like not a lot of thoughts about the game were like publicly posted. So this when this deck was posted in 2019, like no one had, from what I understand, talked about this kind of deck before. Or I guess you were saying people might have already been playing a Caught by Snape deck, but they were not playing Ron Weasley. So that just shows that I guess the official view of what was good in the game has evolved very slowly. Probably because like not a lot of public discussion about it.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of publicly available information. Some of the stuff that there is very recent, right? So there's some stuff that's very old. You can go to the Pojo website and see some of the old information as the game was coming out.
Yeah.
Lots of good information there. But then there's a gulf in terms of the information for many years. And then over the past few years, Stefan and the Revival team were hosting some events where we have deck lists from. And so that's been a lot of the information that's been kind of recorded and is available on the internet. Gen Con lists from 2017, 2018, and 2019. The correction for earlier, I think you had mentioned us winning at Gen Con, but actually we won the Dark Mark group. Me, my brother, my friends got 4 out of the top 4 at PAX Unplugged in Pennsylvania. That was later on in 2019. Earlier on in 2019, there was Gen Con, and the lists for that are available, and it was different decks, right? So different decks in those earlier years. And I can get into the history of it a little bit more, if that'd be helpful.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, basically, I was gonna leave the floor all to you, and also we can have back and forths where we feel like it's needed. Any interesting history would be cool to know. Also, like, if my perception of the meta that I've presented so far, if you think is accurate, if you have thoughts on my comparison with my deck versus yours. I'm sure we'll get more into that later because we already had some discussions in private about this. And I think it's something that, like, now I haven't played a lot of Classic. I think maybe the last time I played was when I played you. But each time we've discussed, I feel like I've learned a little bit more, and it's interesting to see where we differ on things. Like me coming from like what the stuff that I played at home, and then seeing what is the current view from someone who's been like playing in tournaments and stuff like that. Yeah.
Fair. So like I said, I'm really excited to continue exploring the game. I think there is more to explore, and so I think giving the listeners a background on where the game's been kind of helps catch them up to like where the game currently is, and let's hopefully people will listen to this, and come up with their own ideas and add their own inputs to the game. So I think the baseline for competitive Harry Potter, and I just kind of think of it as Harry Potter, right? So I know there's revival and classic format and this and that other formats. I just think of it as Harry Potter, the game as it came out, without any fan sets. I appreciate that creating a fan set is a lot of fun, and I think Harry Potter lends itself to creating a lot of fun custom cards, and I think a lot of people have done that. There's lots of different sets, not just from the revival team, but from some other teams that have put in a lot of great work on making their own fan sets. And so there's plenty of that to do. But like I said, I like the original release, and usually I just think of it as the Harry Potter card game. I think the baseline for the Harry Potter card game is just a creature deck. If you're new starting out, creature deck, if you play 30 creatures and 30 lessons and just say, hey, I'm going to put some creatures in play, they're going to deal some damage, you'll win most of your games, especially new players, especially against people who are just learning. I think the next level from that is like a McGonagall creatures deck, where you use McGonagall as your starter. You get access to all these great control cards. You get access to cards like Steel Claw. It goes really well with a creature deck. So McGonagall creatures, I think, is like the first archetype that most competitive players would start out with and would experience. And that was kind of the baseline. I think the 2017 Gen Con list that won was a McGonagall creatures deck. And I think that's really like the baseline for the format is McGonagall creatures. It's a very simple, effective, strategy that does really well and is maybe competitive even in a post-Ron meta. You spoke a little bit about the ways McGonagall can break out of a Caught by Snape and then try to parlay that into a win. And so McGonagall creatures was kind of the baseline, and this is still kind of the baseline. And in 2017, that's what won. In 2018, the Gen Con list That one you can see adds some of the blue counter creature cards. So stuff like snowballs or stream of flames, cards that counter creatures, stuff that lets you kill a creature and then maybe draw a card, or gives you an effect that kills a creature and then gives you some additional effect. And so the big decks, that's kind of the next layer of the meta, right? So if McGonagall creatures is the baseline, the next level would be, you add some charms to your deck and you counter other people's creatures, and that's what we see winning in 2018. And then by 2019, players had a better sense of which cards were good and bad, and you see a greater variety of decks. You see decks where you don't need creatures anymore. If the first level is creatures, and then the second level is, hey, you're going to play a creature deck, but you're going to counter other creature decks. Well, if you have enough of those counter cards, you can just make a red, blue, green spell deck where you counter creatures and maybe do some healing, and that got a top 4 in 2018, along with some other interesting decks like Fred and George, which you could consider a Caught by Snape deck. It had 4 Caught by Snapes, but also has a lot of other things. Potentially, Fred and George could be competitive post-Ron. And there was also Stefan, who runs a lot of the Revival, the Discord, the Facebook group, the community there for Revival. He was playing a Colin Creevy deck, where he was doing a similar win condition where he builds cards in your opponent's hand and makes them draw too many cards. And I think that Colin Creevy deck was the most similar to the Ron deck. But basically, that's the progression from like McGonagall creatures to countering McGonagall creatures to, hey, we really understand that real well. Here's some of the interesting things we can do, given that that's the baseline. And that's where we were in 2019 as we were coming up. By we, I mean, my brother and I and our friends coming up with the Ron deck. And I think the Ron deck basically beats everything that came before it, any of these Gen Con lists. Basically, the Ron deck would beat them 80+% of the time. Really dominant compared to the decks beforehand, and that was kind of the point. That's why we spent a lot of time developing it and coming up with what we thought was a great deck, the best chance for us to win the tournament. We wanted to go to PAX Unplugged and win the tournament, and so a lot of what we were doing was try to think, if somebody shows up and plays, this deck from 2019 or that deck from 2019 or this other thing that hadn't seen play. We just wanted to cover all of our bases, and that's kind of how the Ron deck came about. That's kind of the history up until the Ron deck, and then from there, I agree with what I think you had mentioned. Basically, the Ron Caught by Snape deck becomes the baseline, right? Because it's so dominant, it can beat a lot of these other decks. After that, focusing on beating the Ron Caught by Snape deck is important, right? It's kind of the baseline. If you want your deck to be competitive, after that, you have to be able to deal with that deck, kind of as an assumption.
Yeah. I mean, that's so I don't know if there were other decks besides this one that played Ron, Ginny, and Seamus, and like the whole character engine. I think the Caught by Snape is the best thing you can do with that. But I remember the progression when like getting cards at home and starting to try to figure out what was competitive in the game and good. Like that was a process that I did at home with like my brother and friends for many years. And the progression is like similar to what you mentioned. Like a lot of the early decks were like just put a lot of creatures and just maul them down. The first version of a Ron deck that I made was very unoptimized, and then I slowly started realizing how good it was and how versatile it was, because of the draw, because of the extra actions, because it could deal with a lot of things at the same time. Like it could deal with creatures really well, especially because of Quirrell. It's really easy to just get all the creatures back into the hand. So you just get so much momentum and value from it, and the versatility of it is like an engine that you can put so many things in. Caught by Snape is one of them. and even after banning that, like the best decks in my house format were still like Ron decks, because of the draw and the extra actions. So it's my experience has been like that too. That basically this engine is like this the strongest thing in the game, and it makes sense for me then that the format revolves around either like playing that yourself or disrupting your opponent playing that. So like even the McGonagall lists that you have shown me, you will play certain characters, not necessarily because they fit within the McGonagall deck on their own, but because playing a Seamus means it's harder for your opponent to play their Seamus. So that's an aspect that I didn't experience until like or I didn't think about until I started playing like actual Classic with the real unique rule. So yeah, so to me it makes sense that is what the format revolves around, and yeah, I think there's still a lot of exploring left, probably. What I played at home, which I mentioned to you as well, was like more pure versions of the McGonagall decks. Since I played with my own version of the unique rule, it means like the Fred and George decks, the McGonagall decks, they don't play any characters. They just try to get to whatever they're trying to do as quickly as possible. Like with the McGonagall deck, you try to get to 4 power, because that's when you can start like disrupting your opponent's Ginny, getting it back into their hand or getting it off the board. I think a really relevant thing that I saw from your deck is playing Peeves. Maybe speeds the character decks up too much for a card like Picking on Neville to be effective. And yeah, I was playing Dean Thomas myself to try to like just put buffer cards that protect your Ginny from Picking on Neville and Dobby's Disappearance, but that doesn't seem to be as relevant in the Classic decks I've seen so far. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the character race is important. Any game, right? So I think why we keep stressing that there's so much left to explore is that, hey, this is 20 years in. This is a long time in. There's been a lot of time to determine what the best cards are. But even as you know, just a few years ago, 2019, the considerations for the ban list were McGonagall and Flitwick. Right? They were considering banning these cards as starting characters. That was the list. Yeah. And so the game, right, from 2017 to 2019 grew a lot, right? So it went from these McGonagall creatures decks, and like I appreciate that you said that your progression with decks was fairly similar, where these creature decks are very, very strong. I think in general people underestimate how good the creature decks are, and I think in like a revival format where VTJ is banned, where Burrow Snuffling is, they changed the rules so that doesn't work, where Peeves and Caught by Snape and Escaping the Dursleys, where these other cards are banned, you're banning the only things that can compete with creatures. Creatures are damn near broken. They were the best thing for years. They won Gen Con, 2017, 2018, and 2019. And instead of doing anything about that, the revival format is looking at these other win conditions and seeing that those are very busted, but you need something very good in order to keep up with the creature decks. And so the characters, I agree with you. The Seamus Ginny engine is probably the strongest engine in terms of getting cards and playing things quickly.
Yeah.
It's come a long way, even in the last few years, right? So if you figure up until 2019, there was no Ron decks being played. But since then, I came up with Snuffling Burrow. And so I feel like again and again, I'm advancing the game. And so it doesn't seem like I'm at the end, right? It seems like there's more to do.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. Like I remember looking at the list that won like 2017 or whatever, and being like, I know that I have several decks that can beat this. No shade to the person that made those decks or whatever, but like, it wasn't playing a full playset of Dobby's Disappearance. There were like Baby Dragon in the deck, that like, if you play against the character deck, will like easily bounce it with Quirrell and stuff like that. A bunch of like little inefficiencies in my opinion, and I think that there's like, since I think the game is like, as you said, like it's evolving, and as people share more and more, it's like only gonna evolve from there. So I feel, because it's been like quote unquote dead game, there's so much left, that potentially can be explored. Like, I am a little concerned that it's like going to be CBS decks only forever. Although like I'm not that invested in the classic format, but I would be interested to see if it could evolve beyond a point where it's mostly CBS decks. So that's part of what will be explored like going forward.
And the thing to think about, right? So what constitutes a CBS deck, right? What constitutes a Caught by Snape deck?
Yeah.
There's going to be different decks running different amounts of them, right? So the Ron decks, they have 4, but they might not, right? You might play other adventures that are about as good, right? So Escaping the Dursleys, very strong. Stuff like Hagrid's Needs Help. There's some very, very strong adventures through the Arch. There's other adventures that compete with this spot. There's other cards that compete with those spots. And it doesn't seem like Caught by Snape is as important as like a Ginny or a Seamus. And so we could say, hey, Seamus decks or Ginny decks. But I think the reality is that, and all these cards are going to be big parts of the meta, right? There's no new cards coming out. You know, the fact that we've discovered these cards, right? So we didn't realize Ginny was as good as she was, you know, until recently. And there's probably other cards that are sleepers. Yeah. And I think we have done a good job. So this is the advantage that we have now, and that people listening to this have the advantage of all of this time spent by other players in figuring out what the best cards are. Just a few years ago, the general consensus was that picking on Neville was maybe the best control card, was maybe better than, or at least as good as Dobby's Disappearance. I think part of why Dobby's Disappearance is better is that we're using Ginny engines, right? So we're using Ginny to draw a bunch of cards. It means that when you're playing these Dobby's Disappearances, which don't have as big of an effect and lose you a card because you have to play it, well, that cost is not so much, right? If you're playing a card for a smaller effect but you lose a card, this is what Dobby's Disappearance is doing. If you're drawing a bunch of cards, that cost isn't as high. Exactly. Something like a Hagrid Needs Help is better because of the format it's in, because Ginny is so good at drawing cards, that once they have Ginny, you can just say, hey, they're going to draw as many cards as they're going to draw. They're going to draw plenty of cards, might as well flood their hand. And so you do stuff like a Colin Creevey or like a Hagrid Needs Help and say, okay, well, your hand is flooded with cards. Here's some extra cards, and I'm going to restrict your number of actions. So you're going to have all these cards in your hand, and then maybe I'll grip hook you. And so there's counters to the counters to the counters all the way down, and I'm interested in seeing where it goes, how the different win conditions interact, how like a McGonagall combo deck, right, a McGonagall VTJ combo deck, how that might do against a McGonagall Snuffling Burrow combo, right? So both of these decks, right, the concept is really easy. Hey, you're getting locked by Caught by Snape. Wait until you have the combo pieces, break out with McGonagall, and then play your combo pieces. Well, with BTJ, maybe, is that easier or harder than doing it with Snuffling Burrow? Or do you just play it with creatures? Is that just better? And so there's questions like this that are important to ask in a post-Ron meta. And I agree with you. You put a lot of focus on kind of the Ron decks and the Ginny, Seamus, Caught by Snape, and Dobby, right? These big cards that are good and going to be part of any format. But I think there's a lot of different things that are viable. And once you understand what these cards are doing and what this Ron deck is doing, you can go about building a deck to counter it, or a deck not just that counters it, but that counters it and competes against the rest of the format. I think, like you mentioned, a Ginny deck or a Seamus deck or a McGonagall deck might do well. I think you could also maybe try a Hannah Abbott or Severus Snape as your starters and try to keep them away from healing or keep them away from recovering all these Caught By Snapes. Also, maybe a Fred and George, right? So you have a Ron deck that doesn't play a lot of lessons. Play Fred and George, get that Caught By Snape down turn 1, and they won't even be able to respond at all. And so, not to mention Crabbe and Goyle, right? So there's a lot of counters. I think right after you experience a Ron deck, it's easy to be like, hey, this is just the best thing. There's never going to be something that can beat this. But you might be surprised.
Yeah, it's just so I think there's potential. I'm because of my experiences, like a lot of the options that you're talking about is like stuff I've tried or seen similar things. Like I immediately think like, oh, with Fred and George, it's like, yes, they can get a CBS early on, which is really strong, but character decks can break out of it. They can it's harder for a Fred and George deck to like actually lock like hold the lock, so to speak. So I think there's stuff to explore, but I also think there's big reasons why this is like why this is the deck right now, and yeah, and also like we have two different versions of the deck, and I'm also interested in which one is the better version. But I sort of I lost my train of thought, but but basically I agree with you that there's stuff to explore, but I also see why this deck is so strong, and I think really the debate is going to be whether what you're talking about is possible or not, or if the decks that try to counter it, like they sort of have to break that 50% win rate in order for it to make sense to start to try to counter those decks.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I think, depending on the Ron list, I think there's a handful of decks that can go better than 50-50. But at the same time, we don't have a lot of tournament results or a lot of testing. The kind of that's where the cutting edge is on Harry Potter trading card game right now, I would say. And if you're thinking about playing some classic, I mean that's kind of the area that I would explore. Beating the Ron deck, so getting beat by the Ron deck feels bad. Beating the Ron deck, Ron Caught By Snape, breaking out of the lock, beating that deck feels great. And so I encourage you to give it a try out. Find somebody who'll play the Ron deck against you. Play that matchup.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the getting locked, is a bad feeling. But yeah, that I think because of that, it feels great breaking out.
Agreed.
And so Belgian Extra Large says, if you have to build a deck just to... First he says, I was under the impression that the classic format was very stale because of the fact that the cards Frankie mentioned aren't banned. If you have to build a deck just to counter the best deck, that seems rather unhealthy to me, in my opinion. So yeah, that is basically what we're discussing. It's like, is that all the format is about, or is it not? And I think that's a matter of exploration, but it's also a matter of preference. Like, some people may enjoy playing a format like this, some people may not, and I think that's fine. But today we're going to explore it regardless, and I would like to jump into a match with you, depending on how fast we play, I guess, because I don't want to keep you forever. So we'll see how long it takes, but I think we'll try to do a full match of like 3 games. And if we can't, we'll just see how long the games are basically. But the plan is that we're gonna play a match, and I'm going to do commentary while playing. So Basically, Frank is going to be muted. We're not going to hear each other. We're going to play, and I'm going to try to comment on what I'm doing and why. I'm going to be playing my version of the CBS deck. And I don't know what Frank's going to play yet. Do you want to tell me what you're playing, or do you want to keep it a secret?
Well, if we got 3 games, I'm thinking maybe I'll play a few different decks.
Okay.
Give you a variety.
All right. Yeah, that may work. Like, we don't necessarily need to do like just
one matchup.
Yeah, one matchup. We can, yeah, since we don't have infinite time, that kind of makes sense. So we can do that. Yeah, I think the only thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to mention before we jump into a match is I was always playing this card, the Fat Lady, in my run decks, because she can search out Seamus and Ginny, and it's absent from Frank's list, and I think we did some odds calculations, and in most cases you should get I think you have good odds to get both Ginny and Seamus if you have 4 Peeves, because you can play your Ginny or whatever, or your Seamus, and then play the Peeves, and then use Peeves to get like 7 more cards of your deck before your opponent's first turn, and that is the most impactful part. But a discussion is if you should play the Fat Lady to hedge for the cases where that doesn't happen, because she will basically guarantee that you find both Ginny and Seamus on turn 2. That's just a little caveat, but maybe that's something that's only relevant in like 10% of games. I don't actually know the exact numbers, but it helps your odds a little bit, and it's a question if it's worth it or not.
Worth looking at. It seems like what's going to happen is you're going to go play Fat Lady, search for Ginny or Seamus, and then on their turn you're just going to play whichever one, play the thing you just searched for, and then you're behind.
Yeah. The idea is like you play it on top of the copies of the other cards you would already play. So you only play her in the case where you have to, basically. And maybe it gives you, I don't know, maybe it makes your win rate like slightly higher in some cases. Although, in a lot of cases, you will simply like, it will either be that you drew the stuff that you need without needing the Fat Lady, or your opponent drew the characters so that even if you have the Fat Lady, it doesn't matter. So those are both cases that can happen, and maybe that means the Fat Lady is like not worth it, but it's a consideration, I guess.
Yeah, something to explore. I think I wanted to address the viewer comment real quick before we go into games. I think if the only thing to do is to counter Ron, then I would agree. That's not great, and that wouldn't be an exciting format. But I think there's a bunch of different decks that can counter Ron. I think you could counter Ron with about a half a dozen different things, maybe a bunch of different variations of those. And so if there's a bunch of different decks that can beat Ron, all of a sudden you're back to having a metagame. And that's kind of what I'm looking at right now. Good luck in the games. I'm looking forward to playing you.
All right. So I'm thinking I need to run to the bathroom super quick, so I'll do like a short break for the stream, and if you want, you can set up the game, or you take a break too, and we'll be right back with the games. So see you soon. Hello everybody, we are back. We're gonna be playing Classic finally. I think we're gonna roll a die to see who starts. And looks like he is playing his Seamus deck. And maybe we'll roll a d20 to see who starts. Let me bring the chat back up. All right, so I'll start. And there's no mulligan in this format. All right. So, since I'm up against... Yeah, so basically our goal is to get Ginny out before he gets Ginny out. If he gets Ginny out before us, then that's a problem because we don't have the draw. So we can hope he didn't draw Ginny and play the fat lady and search her out. Could have also played Peeves, but if we don't find Ginny, then we lose some time. So I'm gonna try to do it this way. He did have Ginny. Okay. That's a problem. So he has Ginny. That means we have to get Ginny off the board. We can do that with Dobby's Disappearance or Hover Charm. So we need to get to 4 power. And we can use the fat lady to find McGonagall and play her. So we need 3 more power, and then we're able to bounce Ginny and play our own, which might take more time than we actually have room for. Oh, but he's playing Peeves. So I guess to block me from playing Peeves, but at this moment I don't really want to use Peeves anyway, because it means I refill his hand, so that's why I did not play Peeves. So I draw for the turn. So I think here could be a good time to play Fred and George and Caught by Snape to stop him from playing more cards. Not quite sure. I'm trying to figure it out. So might be a bit early. So if I play Fred and George and Caught by Snape now, I'm preventing him from... I'm not preventing a whole lot. I guess he wants to play Lessons anyway. So maybe I should just draw and play Fred and George before it's discarded. Okay, he's playing Colin Creevy. That is okay with me. I don't play Colin Creevy in my deck, and if he uses Colin Creevy, I think I'll be happy about that. So I need to draw for more power. So I'll do that. And draw again. There we go. So finally there's a lesson, but it takes a lot of time to get to 4 power with this deck. I think there might be 15 or 16 cards in the deck that provide power. I think it's 11 lessons. Then there's 2 McGonagall, 1 Flitwick, and 1 Snape. 1 Pomona as well. So I guess 16 cards. So this is a bit on the low end of things. Which is unfortunate. So he's getting to 4 power. Means he can start playing Dobby's Disappearance and picking on Neville possibly if he is playing that card. Dobby's Disappearance on the McGonagall. This is of course one of the best cards in the game. Oh, is using Colin Creevy. So I get to draw 3. He didn't use Peeves. Okay, I thought he might use Peeves there. So I'll just play McGonagall and a lesson and pass to him. We did draw a Charms, so we only need 1 more Charms to get to 4, or one more card that provides power. So I'm wondering if Peeves turn 1 would have been better to increase the chance of finding Ginny. Probably. Because his odds of finding Ginny are pretty high. So if I don't find a turn 1, it's a problem. And I was playing Hannah Abbott. Yeah, this is something I would like to prevent him from playing. So that is a reason to play Caught by Snape, but at the same time he wants to play Lessons anyway, so I still think waiting is what I have to do. Alright, so we have Filch, we have a Charms. So we're gonna play the Charms, that's for sure. The question is what to do with the other action. If we draw for more cards, or something different. So his plan is deboning. I guess we want Fred and George as well. So we can play Dobby's Disappearance and Caught by Snape in the same turn. And we pass. And also if he uses Peeves, we lose fewer cards. We might want to get Madam Pomfrey on the board before he plays a copy of her. So maybe that's something I should have considered. Yeah, he might start playing deboning already now. Because he's at 7 power. And he's using Hannah Abbott. So he might get deboning back, or he could get Dobby's Disappearance back, I'm not sure. So, yeah, he's getting deboning and Dobby's Disappearance back. So he might be able to keep up that lock now. Which means I'm screwed, basically. Deboning. Okay, so I can't play cards. So he passes to me. And this is a problem. If I draw more cards, I'm not sure it helps the situation. I just need an opportunity to play Caught by Snape. So he's going to draw 5 if he can play another deboning. Yeah, I have what I need to play the Dobby's Disappearances. So I'm just going to pass. Drawing more just makes Peeves more powerful, and Grip Hook as well, which he's probably playing. So he's making me draw 3 with Colin. He got another deboning. And he's using Seamus to get another action. So I think we're just playing out the string at this point. Like, I'm pretty sure I'll lose. But there's still a possibility he doesn't draw into more copies of deboning, so technically there is a chance. So we'll just keep going. We'll pass again, I think. So he has 2 copies of deboning here. 2 left in the deck. He probably has 1 in hand, but they might still be left in the deck. So he's making me draw with Colin. Maybe because he doesn't have it, or just because he wants me to draw more cards. There we have Grip Hook. So he can deal 25 damage to me now. Make me discard my hand and yeah. Yes. Oh, that's game. Oh. 25 plus 7 from Peeves. So I guess that game, probably because of, I'm not sure actually on the odds. I'll have to look at the math of that. It's very possible that it's better to play the Peeves on turn 1 to try to get the Ginny right away. Because that was a big deal. So now he's playing the McGonagall deck. And I also think not playing Peeves later on turn 2 might have been a mistake. So he won the die roll. Because if I had, I might have gained access to cards that give me power more quickly, which could have helped. But I'm not sure. It would have also refilled his hand, so it's double-edged. Okay, this hand is decent so far. Oh, but he's starting with Caught by Snape. Okay. So that's a problem. Starting player advantage is big. So I can only play lessons. So I'll start by drawing. and playing a lesson. I'll pass to him. So as you guys can see, the early turns are like incredibly impactful, the cards you can play on them. Getting Caught by Snape out early is a big deal. And he got Ginny as well, another really important card. And now all I can do is really draw for lessons. So I'll draw again. And draw again. And that is a problem with this deck. It doesn't play a whole lot of lessons if you get hit with the early Caught by Snape. So that's an interesting aspect. Okay, finally we got a lesson. We need one more to solve the Caught by Snape, though. On a Sandstone Gargoyle, 2 of them. He passes to me, so I draw for the turn. I have to draw again. And now I can finally play this and pass to him. So I'm gonna take 6 damage from these gargoyles. They deal 2 extra damage if I don't have creatures on the board. Alright, he's playing using Peeves, so I lose my hand. And I draw 7. I draw for the turn. Alright, so this is not going well, but I can get rid of the Caught by Snape this turn. I can't get rid of... I can't play McGonagall, though, because he is McGonagall. So I'll play a lesson. Solve it. Question is if I use the reward to put this one into play. I don't... Probably not. No, I guess I do. And then I can play Seamus and try to dig for Ginny, I think. So I discard 2 McGonagall because I can't use them. And I can play Dobby's Disappearance on the Ginny to stop the draw, which could be useful. So I will do that. It lowers his chance of being able to play Caught by Snape again. And then I will draw a card, I think. So I've lost 2 Ginny. There's a fat lady. I can also play Snape to be able to play Marble Gargoyle next turn. I think I'll just draw. Marble Gargoyle would lower the amount of damage I take each turn by a lot, but I can't play it this turn, so I'll pass. Oh, and I guess playing the Disappearance early could be a mistake, because if I can't get the Ginny on the board, then... if I can't get the Ginny off the board... Oh wait, I was supposed to take damage. If I can't get the Ginny off the board, then I can't play my own Ginny. Okay, he passes to me though. Interesting. I could actually get Ginny on the board now. So I could play the Fat Lady, use Seamus to discard 2 cards, and then play the Ginny. I have the healing from Snape. So what would I discard? Then I would have to discard these though, which I kind of don't want to do. Tricky position. I think maybe play Snape and the Gargoyle to stop all the damage, or he could just, I'm not sure, play Dobby's Disappearance on it. Have to check my discarded cards. So there's still a Madam Pomfrey left in my deck to get healing. Yeah, so maybe I keep the Marble Gargoyle. Or I just hope I draw into another one. There's one left in the deck. So I have to use Seamus to get another action. Get rid of, I guess, oh, this is still tricky. The healing is important. Okay, I'll get rid of the Gargoyle and the Quirrell. Could be a mistake. Then pass, and I'm gonna take 6 damage. Oh, there's Dobby's Disappearance on the Ginny. And I guess he plays Ginny himself now? No, he doesn't. Okay, passes back to me. I draw for the turn. Right, so it's Ginny and Snape. And I can use Snape to shuffle back some important cards. So that would be Quirrell. Oh. Quirrell. There we go. Guess another Quirrell. Maybe Hannah Abbott to get some cards back. Not sure why it's not working. Sometimes untap is super laggy. So 1, 2. We need 3 more cards. Probably Dobby's Disappearance is good. Yeah, we could get 2 copies back, then Hannah can still get 2 copies back if we draw her. There's still 2 left in the discard pile. And yeah, maybe Flitwick to get back End of Year Feast. I think maybe we lost. Or we just get one copy of that back. All right, so we put those back on the deck. And we pass back to him. We're gonna take 6 more damage. So that's bad. Another gargoyle. Oh, he has access to Scribbler Force. Maybe it's time to just concede. I guess I could get Quirrell. So we'll get rid of Seamus and put Ginny back in hand. Yeah, if I take 9 damage now, I think it's just lights out. So maybe I just have to hope to draw Quirrell or a Marble Gargoyle. So I draw. It's not what I need. I'll just concede. Yeah, that was rough. Yeah, he had the kill next turn with the Welsh Green Dragon. Oh, he's playing Crabbe and Goyle now. Nice. We get to see all of the possible counter decks today. Okay, so finally I'm gonna start and I'm gonna be able to play Ginny as well. So we can play Ginny and the Fat Lady. So we'll be able to get Seamus next turn. And I think the Crabbe and Goyle deck plays a lot of characters as well. Hagrid needs help. Okay. So we'll draw 4 cards because we have Ginny. No, 3. There we go. So this gives us 1 less action. Yeah, I could play McGonagall and just get rid of it. Or we could solve it, in which case we take 8 damage. I think solving it might be fine. And this is perfect, so we draw into Seamus. And then we can use Seamus. Discard the Fat Lady and Ginny to play McGonagall. So if he plays another adventure, we can get rid of it. And we pass to him. So I think here we're already in a good position. And this, to me, the Crabbe and Goyle deck seems like the most dubious way to try to counter the Caught by Snape deck. Okay, so we draw 5 this time. I'm surprised by this because I thought the Crabbe and Goyle deck simply wanted to use Crabbe and Goyle over and over, but he's playing lessons. So we'll use Seamus. Get rid of Ginny and Ginny. We can play 2 lessons. No, 3 lessons. 2 lessons and Fred and George makes sense. Fred and George will give us extra draw. And we can pass. So maybe we get the lock next turn if we draw into Caught by Snape. And a gargoyle, so we can draw 6 cards. So it looks like the Crabbe and Goyle deck also plays some creatures. So we don't have Caught by Snape yet, which is annoying. But we can just put this gargoyle back in his hand. And we have to play a lesson first. And there's one, no, I guess 2 more actions. Get a lesson back. And play Hannah Abbott and Quirrell, I think. To draw into the CBS. Now, importantly, if we go low enough and we don't have healing, then Crabbe and Goyle will kill us. So that's important to note. This might be the point where he starts to use them. Oh, he plays Grip Hook. Interesting. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 damage. Probably because he's expecting to get locked now. I think I still need to draw. Wait, let's check what's in our discard pile. Maybe we actually don't need to draw. So there's 4 power. We have 4 power. We need to get to 5 to play the Marble Gargoyles. We have Caught by Snape to stop him from playing cards. Yeah, and we have Snape as well. To okay, I think this is fine. So we play the Caught by Snape, and we can recycle those forever. So we discard a Caught by Snape, Fred and George. Then we use Hannah Abbott to get back the gargoyles. And we pass. So now if he wants to threaten breaking out, he needs to play lesson cards, which means he's not using Crabbe and Goyle. And if he uses Crabbe and Goyle, then we don't need to draw with Ginny. We can just heal with Snape and play Marble Gargoyle. And this will deal 5 damage per turn. And the other as well. So if he does play 2 lessons, then we play End of Year Feast and replace the Caught by Snape. And ask him to repeat that process. Apparently I forgot to draw. And then I would have liked to keep the Caught by Snape in that case. So he's using Crabbe and Goyle twice to deal 6 damage to me. Oh, that's the wrong. So he can deal 6 damage a turn. Actually, I guess he can't. He'll run out of cards. So I draw for the turn. Let's see if there's another gargoyle in here. There isn't. I don't need to use Snape yet. So I play the gargoyle and I pass. And yeah, 6 more damage to me using Crabbe and Goyle twice. So there is a Marble Gargoyle here now. So if I play it this turn, he's going to draw for the turn, be at 31, and take 15 damage. Yeah, so the Marble Gargoyle does give me a turn. So do I lose here or not? That's the question. So he draws for the turn, he's at 2, he can draw 1 and deal 3. That should be okay. I can use Hannah, get rid of Peeves and Caught by Snape to get Marble Gargoyle and Caught by Snape back. Play Marble Gargoyle. I need to heal myself with Snape. Actually, So he can draw. He'll draw, be at 2. Then he can draw 1 time, be at 3. Then okay, so he can't kill me this turn. So this should be safe. I'll take 3 damage. So I'll play the Malfoy, and I'll pass to him. He gets a card. Yeah, he can draw 1 more, then deal 3 damage, and then I'll still have 1 card left. So this should be just in time. Take 3 damage. And he also draws a card with an action. So now I dealt 15. He has 15 cards left, so he should die next turn. Yeah, so I got him. Because I can heal with Snape, I can discard his card, and he can only deal 3 damage on the next turn. So I'm checking if he have more decks that he wants to show, or if we're good for today, and then we can have our post game discussion. All right, Frank should be audible now. Hello.
Hello. Great, huh?
Good games. That was a big ass whooping. I had a few revelations during those games. But that was interesting. Well, one of the things I was thinking about is like the first turn of the first game, I had Peeves in my hand and also the Fat Lady. And probably odds-wise, I should just play the Peeves and use him to try to get Ginny. Because I think getting Ginny is like 50% chance, something like that, on the first turn.
Yeah, especially if you know that you have 7 cards that aren't it in your hand.
Actually, I guess if it actually is 50, I guess I need to look up the odds. Because like if it is 50%, then I guess playing Peeves and playing the Fat Lady... I'm not sure which one is best at that point. I guess it depends on what the odds are of drawing the Ginny if I play Peeves. It should be high.
Yeah, in that specific instance, it worked out just how I said it would. But
yeah,
who knows? You could have done a different line of play.
Yeah.
The other thing was game 2. I feel like also happened a little bit similar to how I mentioned. Hey, a Ron deck can just get hit by an early Caught by Snape, and sure did get you.
Yeah, that was a really good point because like I'm quite low on lessons in my deck.
Yeah, so ironically, Ron is very susceptible to Caught by Snape.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. That's an interesting aspect. And if you haven't had if you haven't even had the time to play Filch or McGonagall, there's not a comfortable way to get rid of it. So I'm not quite sure what you're supposed to do. Maybe I play only 11 lessons in my deck, and then I play 5 characters that provide power. I don't know if you should try to up that percentage. Like perhaps that's what you cut the Fat Lady for, is like get rid of the Fat Lady, put more lessons in or something. But that's, I guess, part of the nuances what we're exploring.
Yeah, it's worth thinking about, right? So part of when we were building that Ron deck, that was something we were worried about. What if somebody shows up to this tournament at Gen Con? There was a deck with 4 Caught by Snapes that won. What if somebody just shows up to this event and puts down a Caught by Snape turn 1? And so part of maybe add some extra lessons, maybe add some extra, Filch and McGonagall, but half the time you're not going to even have a chance to play them. But
Yeah.
in some of those situations, like some of those Caught by Snape's Peeves situations where you maybe don't have all of the best cards, having a McGonagall or a Filch ain't bad.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's like because it makes sense to include some amount of Caught by Snape in like basically any deck because you can sort of catch them off guard. Well, it depends. I guess it depends on what you're expecting. Like if they have adjusted in a way where that doesn't make sense anymore, or I'm saying, I guess it's possible that they have adjusted in a way where you wouldn't want to play it early anymore. I guess you still would just to stop them from playing like Ginny for a turn or two. Because it still gives you room to block certain characters and stuff from their side. But like a problem for me, even in game 1, which could be an argument to just include more lessons, is more easily getting to 4 power. So like the first game, beyond like I probably should have just played Peeves to try to see Ginny on turn 1 so that you couldn't play her. But after that, the problem was like I need to get to 4 power to get rid of your Ginny so that I can play my own, and I wasn't able to. And I guess if there was more lessons, maybe that's more feasible. Like you try to just get as fast as possible to 4 power, and then I have access to Hover Charm or Dobby's Disappearance to like free up that slot so I can start competing with your deck. Whereas the way it turned out now, I just got completely crushed, like completely run over.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand part of what's going on is after the Ginny, I played Peeves next specifically because you block them out of draw cards.
Yes.
Right. So if you already have Ginny, both players, if any player has Ginny down, both players are racing to get that Peeves, because if you don't have Ginny but you do have Peeves, sometimes that can be enough, right? It's a refresh of 7 cards,
Yeah.
and it can maybe get you to a Dobby to replacing to get your own Ginny.
Yeah, but I probably should have played Peeves there on turn 2. Like I should probably have played it, on turn 1 in the first place. But I didn't want to play it on turn 2 because I was like, oh, then I'm giving him more cards and then I'm just giving him more actions essentially. But like I should probably just bite the bullet in that case and just play Peeves anyway because I didn't have any cards that give power in my hand, and so refreshing to try to get to like instead of like drawing for cards and wasting time, I should have just played the Peeves and anyway, even though it hurts, because I think that may have been my only chance.
Even if you don't use it that turn, you can have the Peeves in play and it gives you draw cards. Maybe you use it, a turn or two later after you've had a chance to play out your cards.
Yeah,
you just kind of figure your opponent has Ginny. They're drawing a million cards. Give them a couple turns to draw a million cards while you thin your hand down, and then you hit them with Peeves for the maximum effect.
Yeah, the problem is I'm not able to thin my hand down because my ratio of cards that give powers is so low. So like I'll probably just end up increasing it until I finally reach 4 power, and then I'll be able to actually start playing my cards. I mean, I can still play characters, but it doesn't do much until I hit 4 power. So because like usually filling the board with characters just helps your Ginny draw, and then I guess you want Fred and George kind of no matter what to get Caught by Snape going. But the reason I think I should probably have used it right away is that I want to start playing those lessons like as early as possible because I can't empty my hand in a comfortable way.
Yeah, you have to be able to respond. If your opponent has a Ginny, ideally, like let's say you're playing McGonagall, you turn 1, you play a couple lessons, your opponent plays Ginny. Well, then on your turn, if you have like lessen Dobby's Disappearance, you prevent them from drawing that turn with Ginny. And so even if it delays it a turn, you delay it a couple turns, they're missing a bunch of draws while they're spending their actions to put Ginny into play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the hope is like if I'm up against like the Seamus deck, at least they like you get a big setback if they get to play Ginny, but if you can get to 4 fast enough, I think there's like an inherent like power differential between the engines of the decks, because Ron only you only pay 1 action with Ron to play your characters. That I think it's possible to catch up, but yeah, yeah, definitely in that game, like I spent way too much time in that state where I just couldn't get to 4 power, and then you can establish your own lock with deboning. So, yeah,
Yeah. To go back to some of the things you had mentioned, in terms of Snape being in every deck, something to consider is like a Seamus VTJ deck may or may not play Caught by Snape. Maybe Hagrid Needs Help is better for that deck, or just no adventure. You're just planning to just ramp to your win condition. And so I could see a Seamus deck similar to the one I just played. I was playing Seamus. What was it with the creatures? Oh no, it was mono red Seamus. Actually, that deck was mono red Seamus, only red. But you could play Seamus with creatures or Seamus with VTJ, right? And if you, does a few things for you. One, it maybe you don't have to play Caught by Snape, and so if they're doing like McGonagall things and they're planning to beat your Caught by Snape, you're a little bit less reliant on it. But also it gives you like a 9-costed card so that you can get around like a pep talk. It gives you a win condition to work towards. It gives you an incentive to play more lessons. There's a lot of advantages to playing the green build. You also have Lockhart's Hair Care Potion, which a little bit puts you on closer to even footing with Ron, if you're playing green anyway.
Yeah, that's actually something I thought about recently. It's like, yeah, if you play like a Seamus deck, you don't have access to Ron in that matchup, but you could play Lockhart's, I guess. So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. But to go back to the analysis of the games, I guess first one, basically, yeah, I think my miss was not playing Peeves, and then that it kind of decided the game, I could still have gone that way if I didn't get the Ginny with Peeves, but I think that was the big thing. And then second game obviously got hit by CBS really hard, and we theorized that maybe more lessons is needed. For the third game, that was interesting, but I was saying that I feel like your other 2 ways of trying to counter CBS decks are better than the Crabbe and Goyle. It seems like it's easier to play against the Crabbe and Goyle deck, although I'd not seen it before, and I was impressive at how quickly it could damage me. My theory was that Marble Gargoyle would really help in those situations, because once you have the lock going, that card will close out the game in a small amount of turns so that they don't have a lot of time to damage you. And that kind of turned out to be true, which I like to see. So I'm feeling maybe that was a good decision to play the Marble Gargoyle. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think for that matchup, the Marble Gargoyle is great. It worked really, really effectively. It worked exactly how you drew it up. Yeah. And that gets into some of the intricacy of the format, right? So you can play a Ron deck with Marble Gargoyle, and maybe that's worse in some matchups. Let's say you're playing against another creature deck, or some of the other matchups, it might not be so good. But in your Crabbe and Goyle matchup, it sure is great. And so that's kind of the subtleties that you get into, right? Because just in that match, I played 3 different decks against Ron. I think they were all competitive. And so that's 4 different decks, just from that match that are competitive. And the Marble Gargoyles maybe help you against Crabbe and Goyle. Maybe it hurts you against the other ones. And so it's that kind of balancing act.
I'll try to figure that out. Like, my theory is that once you have the lock going, you can clear, creatures from the board with Quirrell or with other cards like Hover Charm and Dobby's Disappearance. So it might be possible that the Marble Gargoyles are like always a good choice, but I haven't really tested it a lot, so I'm not confident to say that yet. But that's the theory at least, and I figured, in theory, yes, against the Crabbe and Goyle, just because. Well, I guess you were playing creatures, and I did have to return them to your hand. But in terms of the racing speed, because like in any other matchup, if I get the CBS lock, the damage output from my opponent is 0, right?
Yeah.
But if against Crabbe and Goyle, it's like at least 3 a turn.
Yeah.
So then the math becomes a little bit different, and then your own damage output matters more because it's like instead of you just drawing 1 card a turn, you're drawing a card and taking 3 damage, and that puts more of a clock on you. So you need to be dealing more damage. But I think it might be better overall because being able to close the game out in fewer turns will always be positive if that is what the change actually results in. So I hope that that's the case. But yeah, there's some interesting takeaways from this, and also what you were saying that there are a few decks that seem viable and interesting. A lot of the one thing that feels frustrating sometimes about the format is like how quickly it feels like games are decided, like if you get the Ginny out early or the Caught by Snape early, then I can be in a really bad position. So that's both I guess it's exciting because things feel like super high stakes, but it can also feel like games are over fast and there's not much of a struggle, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely possible. I think once you have like 2 optimized decks, sometimes you're going to get those like lopsided games. Sometimes you're going to get back and forth Ginny wars with Dobby's Disappearance, where you're going back and forth and playing Dobby's and each fighting over Ginny, right? So sometimes you'll have those close games. And it depends on the matchup, right? So I think the Crabbe and Goyle one went right to the wire. You did have some extra healing, so I think you would have been, fine either way. But even that second game, right? So you were putting up a fight toward the very end. Maybe if you had just a little bit more healing, it seems like maybe you were just a few cards away. And so sometimes they say suspenseful, but yeah, the first few turns are very important. You got to optimize your deck for the first 2-3 turns.
Yeah.
The game's mostly over by then. It's the most important parts. Something I would consider for your deck is maybe Sandstone Gargoyle instead of Marble Gargoyle. It's something that we considered for the Ron build. It lets you do the things you want to do for fewer lessons. You can do them for 3 lessons. It does a little bit better in terms of winning a race, in terms of getting it down quicker. And then by the time you're dealing damage at the end, it's not a lot of situations where you need to be dealing 15 versus dealing 9 damage. Even at the end of that game, if you had used Snape, you have another couple turns. And so probably Sandstone Gargoyle, might have been good enough. Something to consider.
Yeah, that is something to consider. I thought about it in theory. What I liked about Marble Gargoyle is like I kind of want to go to 4 anyway because I need to. Well, I want to be able to get access to Dobby's Disappearance and stuff like that. Maybe that's not strictly necessary always, but like if they have Filch or McGonagall or whatever, then you will need it. And of course, in all those games where you need to get rid of one of their characters, you definitely need to get 4 power. So I felt like, well, the leap from 4 to 5 is not that big, and the damage difference is a lot. And I feel like I usually don't want to start playing the creatures until I'm like established the lock anyway. They're just like a mechanism to close things out. But that could be wrong. Like it could be that it's useful to start dealing the damage a bit earlier. Like I don't know, you get the Caught by Snape, and before you reach 4 power, you put your Sandstone Gargoyle down, just start dealing damage earlier. It's just the mindset I'm coming from is like, no, you just get the lock and then you get the damage card. That's basically my approach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's worth thinking about. If you get the
Yeah.
lock, if you could just heal, you're set, right? So you almost don't need the creatures, right? So if you can heal out, like once you get the lock, basically anything you do is you're gonna win.
Yeah,
But
yeah. You just need something to, like, um, I guess in what's that broom that like puts you can use an action to like put a card on the bottom,
blue
blue
bottle,
blue bottle. Like in theory, if they are not dealing any damage to you, you could just play that, right? But
yeah. And so if you have
because
them
of
locked, anything that's not Crab and Goyle isn't going to be dealing any damage to you,
yeah.
and you can just blue bottle broom for Caught by Snape infinitely, or for deboning, or for some of the other things. But you have to be like really low on cards in your deck, and
Yeah,
so
but there's I
we should
think
set up.
there's also some practical reasons like they can actually threaten to get rid of the Caught by Snape in a few ways. So you want to limit the amount of turns where you are forced to put another one on the board as well. So I think for that reason creatures make sense. Not well, of course because of Crabbe and Goyle as well, but also for that reason, which is something that can come up in like a bunch I guess a few different matchups like that seems to be what your Seamus is trying to do is like you put a lesson on the board, then you're threatening to put two more break out of the Caught by Snape and play a deboning. So for that, I sort of want to be able to replace it every single turn if I can. And then
Well, with the blue bottle, you would be able to replace Caught by Snape if you have few cards in deck. If you get your deck down to like no cards, you can just blue bottle like the deboning or the Caught by Snape, and that could just be like your whole deck could just be two cards, and every turn you just blue bottle the Caught by Snape, and then you just play it,
it's
and then it's just
it's
it's
possible.
infinite. There's nothing your opponent can do at that
Yeah,
point.
it's
But
possible. But I
that's a
get
really
yeah.
big scenario to set up, and so like that's why you don't see blue bottle broom decks. But is it possible? Yeah,
I think it
something
is
to consider.
possible, but I think it's just simpler to do it this way, because um, there is there are cases where like you haven't really run out of cards yet, but you still need to keep the lock going, and then it's like I I you might as well have creatures then, right? Because then you wanna, or maybe that does make sense. I guess you can always draw with Ginny. There are cases where you wouldn't be able to draw with Ginny, like you have too many characters and you're not able to draw with Ginny. So I think you just like going for the simple route makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an argument to be made for creatures in Ron. I think that's
Yeah,
definitely a viable version of the deck. Creatures in Ron is something that we've been looking at too. That's definitely a viable deck, and so I appreciate that you're bringing to this. Just from one game, from one match there. Hey, this is another deck. You got maybe a handful of starting characters, but a few different viable decks with each starting character that is viable.
yeah, yeah. So I'm starting to appreciate that, and I'm kind of curious to look into some of the nuances. Like, okay, um, like in theory, maybe my fat lady pick helps in a few cases, but is it better than having more consistency in terms of how quickly you can reach for power? Like, probably not. So then I'm starting to actually see like arguments against it, um, and good
Because
arguments to change my approach.
by the time you play the card and then you search for another character, that's already two actions. You haven't even played the other character yet.
Yeah,
It's a sync of a few actions. You could be playing. You could just have two lessons down. And be close. Threatening. Lesson. Seamus.
yeah.
Dobby's disappearance.
I do like though how she finds you the one that you didn't find. You know what I mean? Like if you get Ginny, she finds you the Seamus, and the other way around. Like so, she sort of represents both of them, and finding
Yeah.
both when you're able to is really important. but I guess in practice, it seems like in a lot of cases you get blocked one way or the other, and it might just be more important to have the lessons, like have a better game against the decks that try to just play CBS against you immediately. Yeah, so
Maybe.
Interesting games.
Testing.
Yeah. All right, Matt, do you have any other thoughts?
No, just I want to thank you again for giving me the time to speak with your audience. I really appreciate it. I'm still very excited about the Harry Potter game, and I hope that more people will check out the Harry Potter card game. You can play on Untapped just like we did. I'd love to see more people playing.
Yeah. I mostly have like Netrunner players on here now, but like I know there's a few people who followed because of the Harry Potter stuff. Maybe some of the Netrunner players will be interested. I don't know, but it would be cool. I I love the deck. I have a lot of I love the game. I have a lot of nostalgia for it, and I think it's like it's simpler, but that also means that like there's I don't know, when it comes to like high level decks, there's more determinism and like being able to calculate the lines to an end, which I sort of enjoy sometimes. So the classic format is kind of interesting in that way, and yeah, I hope we get to explore more in the future.
Yeah,
So,
I had a great time playing those games, and I hope we get to play more, real soon.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on and sharing your thoughts on the formats. Really interesting. So I'll just we'll leave it at that for today. Thank you everybody for watching, and it's very late where I'm now, so have a good night. All right.
Have a good night. Bye.
Bye bye.